I was going to start by saying that I actually spend a fair amount of time with things I consider evil. And I mean that quite seriously. The old Soviet system, which you still see some vestiges of in Star City where I'm training. I travel a lot. I've seen many ways to be evil. I've examined governments, talked to people who... I'm on the board of the National Endowment for Democracy, and we give grants to dissidents. So that informs my thinking, as does the fact that I was chairman of ICANN, which is the organization that sets policy for the internet. We made a lot of mistakes. I don't think we were evil, but we probably came a lot closer to it than Google ever did or will. But finally, in terms of the disclosures you probably want to know, I'm on the board of 23andMe, which was co-founded by Sergey Brin's wife. I'm on the board of WPP Group, which calls Google its frenemy or its fro. They're a large advertising conglomerate. But finally, I'm on the board of Yandex, which competes with Google in Russia, where Yandex has 60% market share and Google has approximately 20%. So I kind of come at this from many different points of view. And I believe that Google does not violate its "Don't be evil" motto, because I've seen it up close. I've also seen it from outside. I've seen it as a competitor. I've seen how they try to do things. And I am very glad to hear all this discussion of China, because I'm going to blow it to bits in a few moments. But first I want to go through the couple of arguments I wanted to talk about. The challenge of power is great. The great virtue of the internet is that it erodes power. It sucks power out of the center and takes it to the periphery. It erodes the power of institutions over people while giving to individuals the power to run their own lives. Google is part of that. It's one of these things that shines light on everything. It enables people to find stuff out. It enables them to question what their governments are doing. And it's absolutely wonderful. That doesn't mean that power cannot be abused. The abuse of power is absolutely evil. Google, to some extent, understands this very well. That's why they bothered to have this motto in the first place. They understand the danger of concentration of power, and they understand how important it is not to be evil. That's why they have shareholder agreements that give them more power so that they don't need to cater only to money-hungry investors, but can also do what they think is right. There are three people who set policies there. It's the two founders and Eric Schmidt. And they watch one another. They're very careful not to abuse this "don't be evil" thing. Now, the power that Google has is primarily a good power, though it could be used to do evil. It's not like atom bombs. It's not like guns or even cigarettes, which when used correctly are destructive. The power of transparency, the power of knowledge, is fundamentally good, even though it can on occasion be used for bad. And so Google's trust is to ensure that that power is used for good as much as possible. I have seen what they're doing in China. And ladies and gentlemen, the reason they're not violating their "don't be evil" policy is because they're in there and they're engaged. Yes, they could abdicate. They could say, we're not going to bother to go into China. But every time some Chinese person uses Google and doesn't get what he wants, he may notice. He may not even notice the absence, but he does know that he can go find out all the negative information on George Bush he wants. And at some point, he or she says, well, gee, if I can get, or whatever the Chinese version is, if I can get this bad information about George Bush, why can't I find out more about what's going on in my own country? Google, by its very presence and its operation, even if it's incomplete, creates increasing expectations for transparency. It starts people answering questions. It gets them to expect to be able to find out stuff. And it knows that by doing that, people are going to start asking more questions. So I think Google is doing the right thing by going into China. I don't think they're making that much money there. If they are, that's fine too. But the point of it is they are engaging. I know another example in which they're getting engaged. They have a service, you've probably encountered it, where if you go to a website, if you get a search result that indicates a website that may have some malware on it, they warn you off. This is very expensive for them to do. They need to detect the sites with malware. They need to inform them that there's malware. They have a dispute resolution process. They're not perfect, but again, they're engaging where they didn't need to. They could easily have just passed the query through, but they're trying to make the world a better place by doing something that requires them to make judgments. Sometimes they may incorrectly flag a site as having malware. Sometimes somebody has malware unintentionally, they need to deal with it. So the point here again is that rather than just being apathetic, as Jim said, they're engaging and trying to make the world a better place. So I believe that they do not violate their motto, and I think you should vote against the proposition. Thank you.